It's the great rebundling. As more and more people watch content on mobile devices and ditch cable, we'll introduce you to the company that says they're in position to take advantage of it all and challenge some major competitors in the process, taking you inside the world of sports licensing and media rights right now at the Nasdaq. Hello everyone, it's Jabari Young here at the Nasdaq MarketSite, and I am joined by Michael Schreiber. He is the CEO of Playfly Sports. Playfly Sports, a marketing agency that leverages professional collegiate IP. You see those small icons that pop up during your games, right? To show little ads, GNC, Toyota. Well, this guy, he helps sell them all. Naming rights, media rights, all of that stuff. Michael, welcome to the Nasdaq, man. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for having me here. This is amazing.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Well, no problem, man. Yeah. Well, listen, as we're here, we'll go deep into your company in a second because you have such an extensive background. I can't wait to dive into it, man. I always love talking to you about the business. But we're here at the Nasdaq, right? Give me a stock, something that you've watched, something that you may have owned that did well for you. Talk to that young investor. What should they be looking at?
Sure. Well, I think what you can see when you get to sports media is the trend towards streaming. So streaming. One of the coolest stats that I've seen recently is that when you look at the breakdown of consumption of media, streaming is now the largest.
Yeah.
So it's about 37% according to Nielsen, 37% of all consumption.
Yeah.
When you strip that back, cable is now about 30, broadcast is about 25%, and there's another category. So streaming is number one now in terms of consumption. So take that back to your question in terms of stocks. Tell me who one of the biggest streaming players is in the marketplace, right? You can name Amazon, you can name Netflix getting into the sports game, right? And you can keep going. Even Hulu, which we can get into, as part of my background, is the founding of Hulu. But ultimately, that category is an area for growth. So I'm not giving any investment advice, of course, but if I were to say where to think about the future, it's definitely streaming media and streaming media of sports, which is very different.
Yeah. Well, are you bullish on the Fubo TVs of the world? Because they're a public company, right? And this is their background, streaming, especially sports. Would you say that is something that you?
Yeah, they're a hybrid. They're a hybrid between the cable bundle and the streaming, right? If you looked at those stats, they're probably in the streaming stats from that perspective. But they are a hybrid, so it's really interesting to see. But they focus on sports, right? There's them. There's the new product, the joint venture between the media companies that's creating a competitor to Fubo. So there's a lot of interest in that, and the fact is that this live sports content drives that bundle. So Fubo's onto something, this JV's onto something, and you're going to see that continue to happen. There's a ton of content out there, but live sports content is the premium. It's the top. It's the pinnacle, and we can talk about those fans and why it's the pinnacle, not only for viewership, but for marketers.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Listen, it rules the world, right? That's why the NBA just landed $75 billion. I think I broke that, but I'm not going to say it. They don't ever give you the credit, so you got to take it away from them, you know?
I like it.
But listen, man, before we go, and again, cable, your background and establishing Hulu as well, when I talk to you, I always like to start off with one of your favorite quotes from Mark Cuban, right? If you learn to sell, you can learn to do anything. Why is that your favorite quote? I never asked you that.
Yeah. Well, so selling is always part of business, right? Whatever you're doing, right? It's not actually selling a product. You could be selling an idea. Starting Playfly Sports, I had to sell the idea to investors to give me capital to build the business. Even on a daily basis, you're talking about whatever it is. A lot of times right now for me, it's building culture. We've gotten pretty large at this point, about 1,000 people. And it's about making sure we're selling the dream and the inspiration of what Playfly Sports is all about to our people, and having them make sure they sign up and understand what we're building, because it's not easy. It's hard work. So selling continues to be my daily life, no matter what part of the business, whether it's actually selling a product or selling that inspirational view to my teammates.
Yeah. Well, sell me on Playfly Sports, man. I think I know what it is. Again, this is a company that was founded in 2020, right? Our good friend Ike Richmond called me up and says, hey, man, you got to meet this guy.
That's right.
In September 2020, and it sells regional and national advertising to the regional sports networks, right? Better known as RSNs. He has a consultancy division, so you handle naming rights and digital media rights for teams. A college business where you guys are competing against the Learfield IMGs of the world, and based in Devon, PA, and you just said it about 1,000 employees.
That's right.
I heard.
Yeah, 1,000 people.
Long-term creation, or best commercial practices. That's what you guys have. Take me inside of this company, man. Exactly. Did I explain what it does correctly? And
That was pretty
what
good.
else do you have to add
I don't
on?
know if you need me here. That was pretty good.
I mean, listen,
Yeah.
I followed this company very well, man. Everybody in the business, all the teams know about Playfly. You handle all their media rights.
That's right.
But how does it make money? What are you thinking about? And for somebody who wouldn't know about this business, how would you explain it?
Great. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, the interesting thing is we started the business in 2020 when there were no sports being played. So one of the lines that I love, and really the way I think about it is, and the way I got my investors in at a time when no sports was being played, is that really sports are forever. Pandemics are temporary, sports are forever. And if you think about it, that sports fan, you get your sports fandom on average from 0 to 17 years old. Everybody does. And you keep it until you die, right? And if you think about it, there's only a few things that are that certain: death, taxes, and sports fandom.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and you know, we polled people using Playfly Insights and said, okay, what are the most important things in your life? Obviously, friends and family came up first. Maybe luckily, friends and families came up first. But sports fandom came before jobs, pets, a whole bunch of other things. Sports fandom. So it just tells you how important that is. So I wanted to build a business that utilized that fandom, not only national fandom, but local fans. Sports are not, you don't really have fans of national things. You have fans of teams, local fans. So that was the pinnacle. I wanted to build a business around that, and that's what we did. What we have now at Playfly Sports is the largest sports marketing gateway in the country. We're mostly US, we're starting to look outside the US, but what we do is we help brands and teams matchmake. So in essence, we take all of the activity that a team's got, whether it's their media, whether it's TV or streaming, the biggest growing category for Playfly Sports, or whether it's their in-venue or their activations that they have on site. All of those can be set up and create a network effect so we can sell them to the biggest advertisers. For example, one team isn't going to be able to sell to the largest advertisers in the country. And one advertiser, a big national advertiser, isn't going to be able to get to every team. So we do that. That's what we do. That's the cornerstone of Playfly Sports, that gateway. We sit in the middle and create that network effect between all those brands. So when you see that bug on the screen, when you see that ad on the jersey, most likely we helped create in some way that network effect to get that brand onto that jersey and get that revenue flowing. So ultimately the brands can get in front of those fans, and those, we call them forever fans, because ultimately, as I mentioned, you never lose your fandom.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does it make money? I mean, I'm assuming that you take, obviously the fees and associated with all of these contracts that you do to help leverage his IP and make money in between, almost like the new middleman in a way.
Yeah, the coolest thing about what we do is we only make money when everybody else wins. So when the match happens is when we make the money. So ultimately, if we can get the brand to activate with the team, and if we can get the team to help the brand, ultimately that's when we get paid, and we get a rev share off of the experience off of the transaction that happens that we create. So we do it through exclusive rights. Sometimes we're the exclusive seller of the inventory. Sometimes we're the exclusive partner of the brand. And then we do it on non-exclusive basis a lot of times as well, where we actually see the opportunities and help everybody. But ultimately, the size that we are now, managing some partnership with most of the pro teams in the US and the top athletic departments, we have this ability to see the whole sports ecosystem in the US. So we can actually see where the opportunities lie, whether it's for a team or for a brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unless your competitors are your agencies like CAA, Excel, Octagon, right, Wasserman's of the world, and again, the Learfield IMGs. When you look inside the business, though, right, again, sports marketing, you and me talked about this all the time. You hear your pundits, right, that this is a business, because you guys sit in a very interesting seat within the ecosystem. Because there are teams like the Yankees who may not need Playfly because their brand speaks for itself. But then maybe a team like the Pacers or something, they may need Playfly because, again, you got to expand their brand. But then you hear about the other side of it, right? You're promising these guaranteed rights, and then you get caught up. I mean, Learfield found themselves in $1.1 billion of bad debt because they merged and caught up in that. So you have these huge guarantees at the top, right? And when you have that much guarantee, like, how do you still are you able to make money in the middle?
It's a great question. So I don't want to speak to any competitors directly, but you can make bad financial decisions for your company in terms of creating situations, but the fundamentals of the business aren't necessarily bad. At the ultimate range, you structure a deal to get exclusive rights that you think you could beat over time. So you're making a bet based on your company's capabilities. Nothing else. Not about the industry, it's about your company's capabilities. If you think you can create better rates, if you think you can create more fan data off of these elements, if you think we can create more value, more growth over time, we do. We use fan data. We use sponsorship best practices across the industry. We have this visibility between college, pro, high school, and youth where we can see all of it. So ultimately, when we make those bets, we, on pretty much a majority basis, are figuring out how to make money. Now, it's not day one. The cool thing about this strategy is you're willing to take a bet day one, and you start making money maybe day 2, day 3, and day 4, not day 1. So the ultimate goal here is to continue to build and show progress over time, and then come back to all these partners and show them, and they see it over time, all the success, all the brands that end up on their jerseys, on their broadcasts, whatever it might be. And ultimately they sign up again. And as you renew over time, those relationships get stronger, those commitments are less required.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I was to say, if you give me an example, the deal out there that I always look to is the 15-year, $300 million deal with University of Nebraska.
Sure.
That deal, right? On the whole, somebody sees that and they say, okay, Playfly has promised Nebraska $300 million over 15 years. How do you make money, and what must you make in order to maybe see that return on investment?
Sure.
330, 350, what do you have to make over that span of 15 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when you have public universities you do work with,
your numbers get out.
Numbers get out. It's part of the requirements.
Yeah.
That's exciting and interesting part of the whole industry, especially the college sports industry, is the public element of the largest players like in Nebraska. So Nebraska was really a organization, and there's many others that we have structured with, that was just trying to think a little bit ahead of where the world was. College sports is changing. I'd love to dive into all the changes here if we have time around college sports. It's a wild time in college sports. The one thing we all know is that every year going forward in college sports is going to be different. That's the only thing we know. Everything else is probably going to change in some way or another. Nebraska saw that. They were willing to push the envelope. They committed a whole bunch of flexibilities going forward in terms of allowing us to be innovative and try new things. I'll give you one example here in a minute. So we saw all of that innovation and flexibility, and we said, that goes into our business model. That goes into our growth plan. And you can see when we build our models how we're going to exceed that big number that you referenced. And we're going to exceed that significantly, not only for our own benefit, because we get a revenue share of that exceeding, but for Nebraska's benefit, because they get a revenue share over that big number too. So ultimately, that type of partnership is what we look for. I'll give you one example. So Nebraska, a year after we struck our deal, worked with us and created actually one of the largest, the single largest women's sporting event in the history of the United States.
That's right, yeah.
So they took their amazing volleyball team, women's volleyball team, put down a court in the middle of their football stadium, Memorial Stadium.
Yeah.
They put 92,000 people in that stadium. That's bigger than an NFL stadium.
That was epic.
Now remember, college stadiums are bigger than NFL stadiums. So the larger crowd than an NFL game, sitting there watching the amazing volleyball. We had flyovers, we had new sponsors come in. That type of innovation is how you get paid back for those things. And you need partners willing to do that.
Right.
And Nebraska was that partner.
Yeah, I can find a volleyball team if you can promise me 90,000 people that put in the stadium. I know I can, man. But listen, you hop in the news, right, into your company, and again, we'll dive back into just how you built it, and you had to use some of your own money, and you have investors, Sinclair Broadcast Group, one of the main investors. But some of the moves, or one of the major moves that's going on right now in your C-suite is that you've passed over the CEO helm to Craig Salone, who's in your company, and you're taking the executive chairman role, right? What was the decision behind that, and how does that conversation go? Because a few months ago, me and you were hanging out, Chicky and Pete's, and all of a sudden you were CEO, and now you're executive chairman.
Yeah. So we're doing a transition this fall. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, it's exciting for me and for the whole company and our investors. What we've done, so we are about to hit our 4-year anniversary. So we're still a young company. We built our company through acquisitions as our original consolidation base.
Yeah,
and I mentioned
you used the cheat code.
Right, exactly. When I talked about selling, right? Not only do you sell to get the money in, you have to sell to talk someone into selling you their company, right? So, but ultimately, to put this company together, we did that during COVID 4 years ago, and we've been in startup mode. And startup mode is very different than industrial mode. Startup mode, when you think about it, it's you got to move fast, everything's off the cuff, and you got to go as fast as possible. And we wanted to go faster than our competitors, better and deeper than our competitors quickly. So we've been running solid for a sprint for 4 years. And as we come up on our 4-year anniversary here in September, We've now got big enough, bright enough, and focused enough to have institutional management set up for our company. And that's what I've been doing over the last year. And Craig has been helping me as the president of the company, setting up amazing leaders in each of our different divisions to really be owners of those categories, everything from our media division to our properties and exclusive rights division, et cetera. To now have this institutional management, it actually allows Craig to level up and take day-to-day management, running this large company that we have now. And it allows me to step into that back into that business building mode that I started in when we were in startup mode, but ultimately becoming an institutionalized CEO, I couldn't spend enough time on. Yeah. So it's a great setup now. Craig runs the company, amazing operational leader and sports marketing leader with 30 years of history in this space. And now me as a business builder leader coming in and thinking about things about our next growth opportunities, more M&A strategies, thinking about capital markets and all of these elements that are going to make our company continue to grow as fast as we have in the first 4 years.
Yeah, well, 4 years as a CEO, right? I mean, this is not your first stint. You were at Altice USA, the cable giant. I'll get into that in 1 minute. We get into your background. But what's the biggest positive surprise that you had as a CEO?
You know what, it's our culture. People rally around inspiration, and if you can provide that for them, that's something that I didn't expect. We started the company with two big culture challenges. One was we started the company in COVID, everybody was at home. So you couldn't get everybody in the room and rally around and say, here's what we're gonna do today. Couldn't happen. The other is, because we're a consolidation play, we were buying cultures. We bought companies with their own cultures and put them all together. Yeah. So two challenges there. So the biggest surprise is that we could create this culture in the world of the challenges. And actually now we've won best places to work from two major trade organizations in the sports industry. And people really believe in the charter of building this company and being part of something, right? If you think about it, what we're building, and you mentioned a set of amazing brands that you put in our competitor set. And those companies have been around for 20, 30, sometimes even more, right? We've been around for 4 years. Yeah. So our teammates believe in what we're building and are part of it. And it's part of their legacy in addition to mine. So that's the most surprising, exciting thing for me.
And with positives, there are negatives. What's the biggest negative surprise you had as CEO? Was it the family thing? You couldn't spend a lot of time with your kids?
Yeah, you know what? The fun thing about, yes, so working so hard, but the cool thing about what I've done is I've integrated my family into my work life. Yeah. So the family part is tough, but I'll take my kids and when I have to go to a sporting event, come with me, right? When I have to fly to, and it sounds like a chore to fly to the Final Four.
No, that sounds like luxury, actually.
Yeah, but come with me, right? So, and then even so, the actual name of the company. When I was sitting there, my kids were in COVID school, virtual school, sitting at home, doing middle school, in another room. I'm sitting there working on developing the company. At lunchtime, they came over and we picked the name of the company together. Wow. So we created the list. We went to one of the domain sites, available, nope, playfly.com, available. Wow. And my kids and I picked the name of the company. So trying to involve yourself with your family was so important for me because I'm working so hard and they see it, but they're part of it. They're part of the journey. They've seen this whole arc over the 4 years. So that just makes me proud. And it's one of those legacy elements that is now embedded in my kids when they think about what they're going to do for their job. Yeah. So it's just exciting for me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of kids, man, you almost have to dive back into your background, right? You grew up in Baltimore, and you always tell the famous story that at age 10 years old, this guy wakes up, right? And then you find out that the Baltimore Colts had Dash, right? They're getting out of there, and that was just devastating for you at age 10 years old. Cheers. You remember that moment, man, which kind of fueled you to kind of take on the role it is. Flashback to that, man. Like you get home and you're just you're happy, and all of a sudden you're sad.
Yeah. No, so the Colts, they left in the middle of the night. The crazy thing is when we talk about sports media or media in general, the way I found out as a kid, I got an evening newspaper dropped on our doorstep. Yeah. Evening newspaper, right?
Baltimore Evening News, right?
Yeah, there you go. The Evening Sun is
Evening Sun.
Evening Sun. So that just gives you a sense of how quickly media is changing. But ultimately, as a kid, I was a cult. All of my Halloween costumes. And I didn't understand the business of sports. I work in the business of sports now, and it really has led me to that. But I didn't understand the business of sports. I understood the passion, the fan passion, because I was sitting there as a 10-year-old just crying about the Colts. Like, how could the Colts leave? That doesn't make sense. What does that mean? I thought they're part of Baltimore. Yeah. How are they able to leave? So as a kid, you start understanding and learning about the business of sports, and that's really one of the driving forces that's led me to where I am today. And it's kind of interesting, actually, and just to stick with the Baltimore concept for a moment, even the Baltimore Orioles, which is dear to my heart as well, went through an amazing ownership change here recently. But I get to work with some of these amazing people. So for example, as that matchmaker, as that sort of natural gateway in sports marketing, we released a huge campaign with PNC Bank to be the opening a day sponsor this year for baseball. And we did it with none only than Adley from the Baltimore Orioles.
Oh, there you go.
And we did this amazing, it's actually a really cool campaign that we structured. We did 2 custom spots with Adley and PNC. And so I get to not only have these memories from growing up, but now I get to pull my own fandom into the business and work with the Orioles and some of their amazing all-star players.
Well, I mean, listen, you get over that, right, at 10 years old, and then you go to Virginia for college, right? And you get what was your major there?
It was business.
Business,
Commerce,
right.
Yeah.
You leave college in 2002, and you have this ambition to go work for General Electric because they own NBC, and you went in at NBC. Why did you want to work at NBC? What was the draw?
So it was interesting, and when I was thinking about my career, I was starting to think about a little bit more altruistic in terms of, I know I'm going to work hard. I'm a very sort of motivated, lean forward type person. I'd rather work in things that I really enjoy, and versus work for things that are just money oriented. And so I thought about that and I said, what do I enjoy? Sports and entertainment. So I started thinking about that. I said, okay, everything's a business. I learned this. The Colts left town when I was age 10. Everything's a business, including sports, unfortunately for my 10-year-old self. So I said, all right, I want to work in that space. That's what I'm going to do. So ultimately, I focused in that area and had an amazing opportunity to work for General Electric, and I asked them if I could work in their NBC Universal. Actually, it was just NBC at the time. We bought the rest.
That's right.
During my tenure. But ultimately, it was a dream come true. I got to work in the pop culture, the entertainment, and the sports world. And I was working very hard, but got to do something that I loved.
Yeah, and you helped that company establish streaming, right? Vancouver Olympics, you were testing that streaming out.
That's right.
And that leads you to a very dear time in my heart, right? When streaming was free. We would be getting it and downloading CDs, and then, those when the companies were like, hey, whoa, giving away free content, or people taking it. And then you guys, Comcast, Disney, and you guys get into that connection where you develop Hulu, and you have a big hand in that. What was your whole job, and how did you develop this amazing streaming platform that everybody uses today?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It was a really wild time. So the interesting thing was a lot of content was getting stolen through whether it was the BitTorrent type sites and those types of
borrowed, Mike. We were just borrowing.
Yeah. All right, sure. I don't know. It was a pretty big impact to a IP-based company like NBC Universal, and ultimately trying to figure out ways to get consumers content in an easier fashion was the goal, and a way that had business models that made sense for us. Now, I was digital transformation. And when you're digital transformation for a company that makes tons of money on the big screens, whether it's the big TV screens or the big film theatrical screens, I got a lot of arrows in my back and our team's back, because we were the ones trying to figure out how to make content available on all these new platforms, which was making less money at the time.
Yeah.
So, but we were trying to figure out where the future was going and making sure we're set up for the future. One of the big opportunities at the time was, hey, we could put content on NBC.com. When I started, it was a programming grid. NBC.com was a programming grid. So think about that.
Yeah.
This isn't that long ago, right? It's amazing how quick the market has changed. But ultimately, starting to put content on, okay, well, how do you figure out windowing? Starting to figure out, okay, well, what if we make it available broadcast content only, which is free over the air, make it available for 7 days. Started creating these concepts that then some of the currency players like Nielsen started accepting and allowing with these windows. Well, once you had those windows and the free content, then you said, okay, well, it's really putting it on our website, the best distribution opportunity. And starting to think about, okay, what's actually a bigger distribution opportunity? Well, it's the aggregation of content, and that's been proven time over time again. Cable's the best example of aggregation of content, right? When you put it all together in one package and offer it to people, it has much more scale effect than anything else. So how do you do that? Well, we can go, and we called some of the biggest tech companies in the country at that time, and I could say some of the names, but you laugh at me because some of them don't really consider themselves as big tech companies anymore, or not even around. But ultimately, we called and said, do you want to license our content? And we tried to stimulate a big license where we at NBC Universal would license, and then the hope is that maybe they would call the other companies and license their content. That fell on deaf ears. People laughed at us based on the numbers of the dollar licensing fees. So we ultimately decided that it was time to do it ourselves. So we created a joint venture to put a whole bunch of content from our company and from a number of other countries on one website.
Right. Disney as well.
Disney as well, yeah. And it actually started with Fox.
Right.
So it was an NBC and Fox joint venture. Disney came in a year or two later.
Okay.
So they played a little bit of a wait and see game, and then they came in a year or two later.
Yeah. And then you have, Hulu, right?
I mean, Hulu was born.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. And then from there you left and you go to Altice, right? The owner of Optimum, and one of the largest cable providers in all of the U.S. And you expand their North American operation. And you spent a few years there. What's the biggest thing you learned at Altice USA?
Yeah, so Altice, I got to experience my first entrepreneurship versus intrapreneurship. So Comcast acquired NBC, went to Comcast, helped build their digital platform. So now everything in your living room is on your TV. So I got to do the Hulu experience, the Comcast experience. They were all intrapreneurship, building new businesses inside of a large company. Great experiences, great companies. Altice, a French telecom, was coming in and buying assets in the U.S. and creating a new company.
Yeah, they bought Cablevision.
So exactly, Cablevision, Suddenlink, and they were business building, entrepreneurship style. So I got to come in and help them build the business. Totally different experience because it was a full build. It was an entrepreneurial experience. I joined the founding management team as the chief content officer. I had news networks underneath me. I had a whole bunch of different elements related to the company and how it was run. So I got to do business building, which is totally different than entrepreneurship.
That's right.
So it actually stimulated my entrepreneurial interest, which has now led to what I've done at Playfly Sports.
Yeah, and climbing that ladder, right? I mean, if you're an executive and you're climbing that executive ladder in corporate America and you have ambitions to be a CEO or be an entrepreneur, like what advice would you give that executive right now? I mean, because there's a lot of people out there that may be sitting on ideas, they don't know how to execute them, they don't know how to communicate them, but they're in the middle of that corporate ladder, you're trying to head up or maybe head out. What would you give them? Because you've built your career, started at General Electric, went to Altice, and now you're CEO, executive chairman of your own company.
Yeah, thank you. It's really about risks.
Risk.
And you got to be willing to take a risk. So a lot of times you have to leave a really good job, and that's hard.
Wow.
So talk about, and a lot of conversations with my wife about what we were going to do. I'm going to leave this job that pays a lot of money. I'm going to go do something new that doesn't pay as much money but has a good amount of equity involved in it, right? Making those decisions, taking those types of risks is how you a lot of times get that opportunity. Even internally at a company, you may get an offer that says, hey, come over here and run this for us. And you're like, oh, I've never done that before. That would be a risk, a personal risk. Take the risk. My opinion is that the risk is how ultimately you end up with those rewards, whether it's climbing the ladder, starting new companies, building equity, moving from a worker class to an owner class. You got to take the risks.
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen. It doesn't fall in your lap. You have to actually make the move.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Even if you're transitioning between a job, let's say you're not working somewhere anymore and you're looking for the next job, it's tough to go take a job that would have less cash compensation and more equity compensation because that's a risk. Take the risk.
Yeah. Would your business parable be, that you got to see? I always heard this phrase, never let a crisis go to waste. And what that is in business is that you got to see opportunity in the middle of a crisis. And here you are, right? Again, sports completely paused at that particular time. We start to see. We're starting to come back on air at that point, but nobody's really trying to go in. In Fox Sports, they get out, right? And then you see this opportunity, again, not letting the crisis go to waste, and you go and buy their in-house properties, right, that were making money because Fox Sports had owned the regional sports networks, and you go and buy those businesses, and now you combine them, right? As I say, the cheat code, right? Because you're not really a startup in a way. You guys just went and combined a whole bunch of businesses to create Playfly. Fox Sports being one of those major businesses, their home team sports, right? I mean, like, how do you, what made you do that? What makes you see this opportunity in a crisis?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One thing that was happening in both college and pro sports is the industries were changing. So college sports, the athletic director was turning much more from an administrator to a sports business person. and they didn't have necessarily the support infrastructure to do that.
Yeah, they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and so we started seeing that, and I said that's a huge opportunity for a services company to come in. The same in pro sports, a little bit different. This pro sports were the franchises were getting traded at a really high rate to new money. These were entrepreneurs, business runners, versus family offices that have been in that, that have owning teams for 100 years, right? So that was a whole different mindset. They're used to bringing in service providers and consultants and all of that to help them drive their business. So you're seeing both waves in pro and college happen at the same time. And you start thinking about my experience in media and looking at teams, whether it's a college or a pro team, as a media company. Right? They're focused on an audience, they're focused on getting in front of the audience, building their fan engagement, and then selling access to that audience, right? That's a media company, right? You don't think about it because they're focused on winning on the court or the field. But when you come from my background, you think about it as a media company. And if I can put that filter in front of each of these organizations and help them think more like a media company, we can succeed as a service provider. And that's exactly what happened. So I went and looked for those assets. Like the Fox Sports assets, even an outgrowth of CBS, Outfront Sports that we bought, that all had elements of that service provider mindset to pro and college sports, putting it together and putting that vision together that teams can think like media companies.
Yeah.
And that's really how we started.
Yeah. Well, now, and then you leave, right after you leave Altice, you have to take your own money to go, and then you have to get investment from, again, Sinclair, as well as Access Holdings down in Baltimore. How do you do that? Because, again, for that person that maybe wants to go and try this themselves, do you have to, is it, you go to your kid, they want to see a business plan. I'm sure they want to see a nice pitch deck, but what do you have to convince them of? Because, again, RSNs is a tricky business.
Well, one thing is to have an idea. And a lot of people have ideas. Taking the next step is really important. And speaking of the risk, putting it on a page. So it sounds elementary, but literally putting together a pitch, a PowerPoint, whatever software you want to use, putting together a pitch and walking through a business plan is the most important thing you could do. Even if it's something that you want to start in 10 years from now, 5 years from now, or next week, put it down on a page. Right? So that takes from a big risk to a medium risk, because once you have a story that you're telling, and going back to this everything sales, the Mark Cuban line, once you have that storytelling on a page, that's something you can start showing people. Once you start showing people, people understand it. Once people understand it, you get them on board, right? That's the same with investors, teammates, customers, clients, and partners.
Yeah, I want to hit the lottery for $100 million. You see, saying all I got to do is write it down. It's going to happen.
You could try.
I'm gonna do it, man. You did it. I'm gonna do it. Yeah. I mean, listen, you again have all of this experience in the cable business, right? And you know what it takes to run a streaming business. You help create Hulu again, and you always call this era we're in the great rebundling, right? And I'm assuming, as me and you always talk about this, you look at the media business today, right? All of these sports teams and the franchises and leagues, they're getting paid all this money. Meanwhile, you have people dropping cable, they're going to streaming platforms. The mobile carriers, they're profiting, right? I don't know if people see, like, you can get Netflix through your mobile carrier for free. Netflix has ads now. Never thought I'd see the day, right? I'm gonna get ads now.
And
sports, right? WWE, NFL coming over, right? I mean, this is a very interesting time. Again, you call it the great rebundling. Break that down. Like, what are we seeing in the media business? Because every day is something new.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how it's happening. So the cable bundle, if you go back 10 years ago, the cable bundle is the ultimate package of content. It had everything, right? There was no breaks in the armor. HBO was only accessible through the cable bundle. You can only get your live sports through the cable bundle. Everything was behind that wall, right? Probably 15 years ago, maybe. But ultimately, that was the greatest package of all time. Now what's happened is we've seen that breakdown. HBO goes outside of the package, this, that, you name it. Netflix comes to being, Hulu comes to being. All of these elements have changed over that time period. And what you're seeing now is everybody saying, it was a lot easier to distribute and sell content at a high rate in that old cable model. So what you're now starting to see is anybody and everybody, even the most powerful and most interesting packages like a Netflix, are starting to think about how they rebundle, how they get distribution. And ultimately, everybody, what they're really doing is saying, the cable model was the most efficient, is the most efficient. How do I look more like that? How do I get support? So you'll have a lot of these major brands call up a major carrier and say, well, you're distributing connectivity. Can I be bundled in? And ultimately, getting distribution, they're probably taking less dollars for being in the bundle, and the same, which is a sub fee. If you go back to a sub fee on the cable service, right? You're getting 50 cents to distribute the network. The network's worth a lot more than that, but you're getting this amazing distribution boom right away.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you're starting to see that. You're seeing it from a distribution level, so the big streamers doing partnerships with broadband and wireless, and you're now starting to see it within the big streamers. So for example, Netflix taking on sports content,
right.
but even Amazon and a lot of their investments, you talked about the NBA deal that you broke, ultimately Amazon is a big partner in that grand rebundling. They're putting sports inside of their bundles, right? A number of those companies are doing that. So ultimately, not only is there inside intra-bundling happening, and then there's external bundling happening. So ultimately, we're all navigating back to that same place. So that's what I call the grand rebundling, because really the most effective thing is for all of that to be bought at once, right? If you think about it, if you look at your home and with your family and see, oh, well, I have 2 subscriptions to Netflix, I have this, I have that, and you really look at it, you're like, you know what, it might be more efficient to pay that $85 a month to my cable provider for all of this stuff in one.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that's where we're navigating, because it is the most efficient.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting and exciting. So we're going to see that happen. I say the next, it's not going to be a 1-year thing, but over the next number of years, we're going to ultimately see something that looks a lot like the cable bundle.
Scare me a bit though. Who suffers in all of this? Because you got the churn. Obviously, the consumers are going to go in and out. I do that all the time. I'll drop one, I'll drop the other. I'm ready to drop Paramount right now, so I can go back to Disney maybe. So I mean, like, it's that churn. But scare me a little bit. What are we in danger of seeing if you still see all of this fragmentation in media? Because content's all over the place.
Yeah.
And quality is suffering.
It is. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of these companies come together, and consolidate.
M&A.
Yeah. M&A.
Can they get past Linda Khan though, right? Because she's saying no. We're not doing all this.
Maybe. So, but that is what you're going to see is you're going to see that these individual services can't do it alone. And what is that? That's rebundling.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's the M&A is going to happen. It's the most powerful distributors of connectivity, still cable providers, interestingly enough, and wireless providers are going to be able to have this moment where they can say, okay, well, let me take all these streaming services and bundle them together. So, but ultimately, you're going to see some of the smaller guys fall off. So there's probably the long tail of streaming services that just aren't going to be able to sustain. They're not going to be able to make enough money to sustain.
Wow.
So they're going to go away. And you're going to see the mid-size to the big size consolidate. And you can even see it even in this joint venture between the major media companies, even though they're not merging their companies, they're merging their content.
That's right.
So it's all happening over time. So really, you're going to see the long tail go away. You're going to see the mid and short tail consolidate.
Yeah. And how do you benefit in all of this? You're right in the middle of it all.
Yeah, we're the constant. We're the advertising. So there's always going to be a game played, there's always going to be a fan watching, and there's always going to be a break for an ad.
Yeah.
So ultimately,
more than a news zone now. They got $75 billion. They got to have a whole bunch of breaks to get the money back.
Yeah. And put an ad on it, right? So there's ads on the jerseys now. There's ads on the courts. There's virtual ads. There's, I mean,
to get in the arena, you may have to go through an ad, right?
Yeah.
You got to walk through this ad to get in here.
Well, talk about Baltimore in the '80s, where we were talking about before. When I would watch an Orioles game and I looked in the outfield, there were no advertising.
That's right.
You look in the outfield now in a Major League Baseball stadium, probably see 40+ sponsors.
I get a headache all the time.
Well, I hope not, because that's what we do. But
well, not when I'm watching the game. When I'm watching baseball. All them ads out there is crazy. Yeah. But good work, man. We're ready to close out here. Again, $75 billion ZMB is getting in. Still kind of closing or finalizing that deal, so the number's still not finalized yet. But again, when you look at this league, very, very prominent league, and your fans score data insights that you release all the time, you predict that the $715 million, right, that they get on the outside of the USA. That's what their U.S. media rights is worth on the outside of the USA. But again, $75 billion, and LeBron and Steph Curry are on their way out. What are you seeing from this league that still gives them that high value? They
have the highest level of international stars, and they have the largest growth globally. So what they're doing is they've created pop culture in the U.S. via star-powered sports. Right, they are the largest in star-powered sports, the NBA. So they've done that in the U.S. They're doing that globally, which is really interesting. There's only a couple sports that can do that globally, right? Soccer, of course, football, global football is another one, right? And one that we don't talk about a ton in the U.S., but it's cricket. So it's interesting when you look at the sports that are globalizing, those are the biggest 3 sports that are globalizing when it comes to team sports: cricket, soccer, and basketball. And the NBA is sitting right on the cusp there. So the stars may not be American-born, but they are huge global stars on this planet, and that's really important for the NBA.
You don't think that'll impact them at all? Because in talking to some NBA execs, they say, hey, who's their next American star? I got Anthony Edwards, right? But again, if you don't have their American star, do you kind of isolate your base?
Well, not really, because the NBA is built for star power, right? So you don't have a helmet on, so
Right.
you get to see everybody's face, right? It's a 5-person roster, so it's star power, right? It's not 11 people on the field, right? And it's ultimately, it's this opportunity for these players to become part of pop culture. So I don't actually think the NBA is going to have any issue creating more stars. It's part of the whole fabric of that league.
Yeah.
Not only that, but as you mentioned, the Playfly fan score, and part of our thought leadership, we actually analyzed all the leagues. The NBA is still the youngest league and the most diverse.
That's right.
So as the country continues to get more diverse every year that goes by, the one league that's going to take advantage of that is the NBA.
Yeah. Can you see them surpassing 75 and getting over the 100?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think they have one of the biggest growth opportunities, and put women's basketball right there next to it. We haven't talked a lot about women's sports, but big area for Playfly Sports and a big area for the industry. I think that's sort of a little bit of an unsung hero in that media deal.
Yeah. Yeah. First $1 million, man. How'd you make it? How did you spend it? Anything you would do different?
Sure. So I think my biggest sort of connection to making compensation was thinking about the entrepreneurship work that I did and putting myself and my face, which was risky, against projects. Hulu, when we started it, was called Clown Co by the media, right? So there's risk, right? When you start moving up, and you talked about moving up in your career, you're doing things that I mentioned, arrows in my back from the big, senior execs who were making, all the big deals. We were making the little deals at the time on the digital transformation side. So you had to be willing to take those arrows.
Right.
And that's how my compensation and my role continued to grow. So it was really taking that role, taking those arrows, being able to build those new businesses inside a big company until I got the shot to leave and start building companies myself, like at Altice and Playfly.
Yeah. So you made your money or made your millions with the compensation from the bigger companies, and then you spent it what?
And I spent it building my own company.
Building Playfly.
So if you ask where my first
Million.
tranche of capital went, it went to start building my own company.
Wow. Wow.
So
Playfly.
yeah.
Was your wife mad? Like, are you really going to take this money and put it into this company?
So when you mentioned, to wrap it all back to the beginning, selling, so I got to sell to my wife too.
And you sold it to her. Wow.
I did.
I'm sure she's smiling now, right? Everything is good.
Yeah.
Listen, Black Business Month in August, I say, what is or who is someone that you admire in the Black community from a business perspective? Doesn't have to be famous, but someone who really made an impact maybe on you.
Yeah, so I got to go to South Africa last summer with my family. And we saw, and I've seen it through some popular media, but we saw the connection between the Black and white community in South Africa and how they use sport, and really Nelson Mandela specifically, how he used sport to connect the community. And I just felt it was just something that I got to see in real life there. And I didn't really take it in fully as an American without seeing that and experiencing that on the ground in South Africa. And it really brought back a lot of the division that we have in this country. And how we're using sport to bring community. And I love that. I think there's so much more to build on using sport. We have so much division, not just racial division. We have so much division in this country. I mean, there's been big political news as well that's creating more division in this country. But ultimately, using sports to bring people together and create communities, that is something that I think we're not doing enough of. And I would say Nelson Mandela and what he did, and how the risks, going back to risks that he took to bring those communities together using sports, I think we have a lot to do and learn from that in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say you want to kind of get some perspective, better perspective, just look abroad. I mean, they're doing some great things in other countries. I mean, they may not be as rich as we are, but their innovation because of that is just there. Get you out of here on this, man. Good to great. And I think that you're probably the best person to answer this. And again, we always talk about this when we talk sports business. And I appreciate the time, man, at the Nasdaq. Thank you. But what's the difference between a good streaming platform and a great one? Right now, we talk good to great. I always say Jim Collins' best business book. So good to great streaming platform. Which one is? How do you tell the difference between a good streaming platform and a great one?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the one that tells me what I like, which is a weird thing, but ultimately, programming services were meant to develop different angles to be able to address different people, right? So that's why there's so many cable channels, right? If you think about it, there's women-focused content, there's men-focused content. There's, for every different type of person in the U.S., ultimately there's probably a channel at this point for it. So now when you look at streaming services, the streaming services that get you the right content at the right time are the best. So it's interesting when you start thinking about it, and the services that are doing it the best right now are actually social media. So social media is learning your habits and presenting you with content that you like more than any other service. There's a great recommendation engine on some of the big entertainment services, but social media, I would say, and some of the big social media players, whether it's the Instagrams, TikToks of the world, are actually programming better than anything else that's out there. So I think we have a lot to learn from how they're presenting their content and how they're programming back to us. So I would say social media right now is presenting the best future for streaming because of the way they present content that you want. They present me Orioles content. They present me sports business content. They present me inspirational quotes, and every once in a while a comedy clip, because I'm a big comedy fan. They know me.
Yeah, wow. Streaming, I mean, you scare. I said it scared me a little bit. That was early. Now you scare me a lot, telling me that social media is doing it the best. I thought you were going to see YouTube or Forbes.com, right? Maybe
there you go.
But
Forbes.
now you're saying social media, man. Michael Schreiber, Playfly Sports. Thank you so much for the time, my brother. Thank you. I appreciate all the insight that you always provide, not just on the show, man, but again, I got a question, always call you up, and you definitely answer the phone, man. So I appreciate it. And much success in your new role as executive chairman. You know, go build some more companies. And I tell you, stay away from the play agencies. I know you were looking to shift there, but don't do it. Just stick within the marketing. Absolutely.
All right.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jabari. I appreciate you being. This is amazing. Thanks for having me here.
No problem. See you next time. Thank you for watching.